Fans ask for this and Engine Masters delivers. We will test the power of an exhaust H-pipe versus an X-pipe versus no crossover at all. This is Engine Masters, which is presented by AMSOIL, which we generally leak all over the place, kind of like this. We're also supported by Mr. Gasket and Earl's Vapor Guard Plumbing. Now this time, we are gonna do a test of the power of a full exhaust system like you'd have in your car and compare straight pipes to an H-pipe to an X-pipe. I've never done this before. I'm really curious what's gonna happen. Now the engine that we're using for this almost isn't important because essentially it is just an air pump that's shoving exhaust so that we can find out what's gonna happen. It makes about 350 or 360 horsepower, so this should apply to you if you have a V8 that is making about the same power. But I'll tell you exactly what this is. It's an LS motor. It's a 5.3, and yep, we're running it with a carburetor. This thing is completely stock with the exception of a tiny crane cam. I think it's 224 at 50, I don't recall. We've got a 750 double pumper Holley HP up top. We're running a 1-inch spacer on it because we found out that it's easier to tune with that with this particular manifold, which is an Edelbrock RPM LS1 dual plane. We've also got a set of 1 3/4-inch conversion headers on this deal, and we're gonna roll it in here, sauce it up with some AMSOIL, fire it up, and the first test that we'll do is gonna be with 2.5-inch straight pipes, Gibson mufflers, and no crossover at all. This thing is completely stock in the bottom end. And you know, these newer engines have tighter bearing clearances than the older muscle car stuff, and so they take lower viscosity. In fact, some of the latest things take 0 weights. But for this, our go-to is a 530 Signature Series AMSOIL synthetic. Okay, we finally got this thing consistent and ready to go, but our curves we're seeing, they just vary by 1 or 2 horsepower here and there, and my opinion is what we're doing here might not change stuff more than 1 or 2 horsepower. So what we're gonna do is run the engine 3 times in each configuration and average the pulls. So,
can I turn on the sound meter?
Oh, and Dulcich has got this decibel fixation.
Yeah, I wanna know.
Is he allowed?
If it's gonna make any difference. Like, I've got to know. All right, what I have here is the decibel meter. It's gonna read how loud the engine is through the various muffler and crossover setups. So I'm gonna take readings at wide open throttle. At idle, the room is noisier than the engine.
Okay, so let's fire it up while we got the temp in it.
It's running.
It's running.
I'm so quiet. I'm so not used to this. It's running. This is just straight pipes and mufflers. We got no crossover whatsoever. So this sounds like Dulcich's truck, except for better.
Better?
Except it's quiet.
Yeah, because they're not out each side going, sounding like 2 4-cylinders running on 3.
That's the sound of power.
Oh. Looks like that's on target with what we've been seeing in our tune-up process. All right, we've got our final wrap up here. This is the average of 3 pulls. Look how nice and smooth and happy. 366 pound-feet of torque at 4,400 RPM, and pretty similar to that all in here. And up at the top, we got 6,100 RPM and 362.3 horsepower. Once again, as an average of 3 pulls. That's with straight pipes and mufflers, and now we're ready to go put in our H-pipe. Now, I should tell you about the mufflers that we're running during all of these tests. It's a Gibson, made in USA, budget muffler called MWA, muffler with attitude, meaning loud. The way these work is that the case is completely open except for a straight through pipe in the middle. And it's a pipe like this, and it's got a couple of rectangular cutouts in it and a few smaller perforations. It's not louvered, it's just got cutouts. The theory being, when exhaust is moving slowly at idle, it just sort of poofs out inside the case and dampens itself and sounds mellow. But when you're on it, it goes straight through and shrieks, which is pretty true. I've got a set of those on a blown big block in a Roadkill car, and I like them. Now we're going to go to the test of adding crossover pipes, merging both twice pipes together, kind of with a common pipe. You can do that either with an H pipe like this or with a big X pipe. And guys have different theories how each one of these work. I really don't. I've never done this test before. I've run both of these in a car, and I can tell you that it sounds more mellow when you do this, but I have no idea what's gonna go on for power. Tech-wise, note that the H pipe that we're using has a full 2.5-inch crossover, the same size as the main pipes in our system. You'll see in some cases where guys will run a smaller crossover pipe, but we're doing full size. Really the same with X pipe, the whole system is 2.5-inch. We are making sure that the mufflers are in the same position for every test. Also, the overall length of the exhaust system is in the same position for every test. There are a lot of theories about where the crossover should go in the system, and we did make sure that the center line of our X pipe lands in exactly the same place as our crossover here, so that's kind of the same. Now, a lot of people will say, well, the crossover, you know, for optimum torque needs to be in just the right spot, and they've got a slide rule and an abacus telling them all this stuff. Here's the deal. The real estate under your vehicle is gonna tell you where you've got to put your crossover pipe, and so that's how we've sort of guesstimated it. We figured, looking at the dyno, at the end of your transmission, you usually put the crossover pipe just after there so it doesn't run into the drive shaft, the oil pan, anything like that. That's about where we've got it on the dyno, very much mimicking what's in a car. What's gonna happen? I don't know, but we're gonna start to figure it out with the H pipe. So I guess theoretically, firing order shouldn't change the H pipe pulsation, any of that stuff.
No,
I mean,
it won't. We're about to see what it's really gonna do, which I'm really curious about because
I am too.
I want to add an H pipe in my truck, hoping to make more power, but I won't bother if, you know, we show nothing here.
Yeah. What?
Oh, nothing. I'm kind of itching to go check my decibel meter.
It hasn't changed. It's been idling the whole time.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
God.
Survey says.
Boom! Ooh, just a tiny, 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 tiny bit. Let's look at the overlay. We saw 370 pound-feet of torque and 360.8 horsepower over the average of 3 curves. But this is what's telling. Look at that. There's actually a difference. So the H pipe is in black, no H pipe is in red, and it did, in fact, add some meat below the crossover.
Here's something you guys aren't considering. If you look at the computational flow dynamics, as the velocity of the gas through the pipe increases, the amount that crosses over decreases.
Basically, you've got one pipe like this, another one like this.
Yeah.
The faster the gases are going this way, the less ability they have to cruise through here.
Yeah,
that's why we're seeing this less there and more here.
Okay, that was better than I thought. So now what? X pipe?
X pipe.
Let's go do that.
Just a little trimming. Should drop right in. Cool.
All right. I'll try not to cut the pipes in the wrong place again.
Should I erase all the magic marker lines on the pipe and give Steve only one to deal with?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
I like that.
Brake clean them off. It's definitely quieter with the H pipe, or the X pipe rather.
So far, I mean, we'll see when we get it up to some speed, but it's funny because we're sitting here and you can't hear the motor.
I hear the manufacturing of fish tanks next door more than the
that's our
engine.
neighbors through the wall. We can hear their routers and we can't hear the motor sitting right here. It's amazing how quiet it is.
But more than just quiet, to me, it's smoother. You don't hear like any pulses. It's just
Exactly.
It's vroom.
Yeah, it's like a tone rather than a blah, 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 blah.
So let me ask you guys something. As you've gotten older, have you started actually enjoying quiet exhaust?
No.
No! Okay. We're about to do our very first pull with the X pipe. go with it sounds better than the H pipe. The X pipe is cooler sounding at wide open at RPM.
It sounds like 7,500 instead of 65 to me.
Once it starts to get to that tone, it really sounds like there's some engine speed. A lot of it's perception, and we talk ourselves in and out of some things, but it does sound
it's
cooler.
pretty clear.
Can I go in and check my decibel meter? What?
We have OCD, anxiety, and depressive. So it's like,
We have
we're a
all the
perfect team.
emotions. God, that's so close to being real.
It is. We looked at 369.9 pound-feet of torque at 4,300 RPM, essentially within a tenth of a horsepower, identical to the H pipe. And in the horsepower, 362.1 at 6,000, which is up almost 2.
Are we ready to look at the H pipe?
I'm ready for the overlay. Ready? Ooh. Basically doesn't care. The H
You know
pipe
what?
is lower above peak torque.
Yeah, the X pipe's a touch better.
Yep.
Want me to zoom in on that? Because it's basically identical in here.
So what we're seeing is that this right here can be the start of the dyno pole and how the carburetor is carbureting. This I would look at as not data. I would start looking at it from like 3,500 RPM to 4,800 RPM, really identical. But let's zoom in and have a look at everything above 5,000, like right there. Now you can get a better look at the fact that the X pipe is making a tiny bit more power than the H pipe. So the H pipe proves to be better at lower RPM, and the X pipe not as better at high RPM.
They're both better down low. I mean, that's a given. There's 5 or 6 pound-feet that I think is verifiable. We're looking right here when we start looking at these spreads.
So
we're looking at 60.8 versus 62. We're
Right.
looking at a horsepower and a half, 2 horsepower.
Yeah, to give you scale on this, the difference between these two lines is like 1 to 2 horsepower. So we're really talking minutia here.
I can really zoom in on that.
Yeah, and it makes it look like something.
And that is 155, for instance, and
355
this is
versus 357.1. 2.1 horsepower, which, for the record, you will never feel in the car, ever. So basically, it's a wash.
I like the sound of the X pipe.
I do.
But I wonder how much more difficult the X pipe is to get in a chassis, in a frame.
Yeah. No,
Because it looks like it takes
And
up a
more
lot more.
expensive. All you need
Yeah.
is a straight piece of pipe, and you can make an H pipe by yourself.
Yeah.
H pipe's certainly less expensive, easier to install, takes up less room.
H pipe, X pipe sounds cooler.
X pipe sounds cooler.
yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And they make the same power, and they're both better than straight pipes. Well, Steve-O, I think we can agree that you were right and I was a chump.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Remember I said 0 was gonna happen and you said there was gonna be power to be had, and there was.
Yeah, I know. A little bit of torque down low.
It was microscopic though.
Well, it was measurable and significant, I'd say.
Measurable, I don't know about significant. But the real question in conclusion is, are you an H-pipe guy or an X-pipe guy?
I don't know. I kind of like this guy. That's why I'm holding it. So simple. Just one straight pipe between banks. Boom. You've got a crossover.
I can't deny it. I'm ultimately an H-pipe guy too. And really for the same reason. It's simple and it's cheap. These are more expensive. I've tried to install these on cars. I've had them on stuff. And there's just more angles and curves and junk to deal with and getting in the way of your drive shaft and safety loop and transpan. The only one I've ever had that fit good was a complete hooker kit for an LS swap on the Crusher Camaro.
But I found the guys on the internet always say these things sound way better. And you know what? I'll have to say I'll give it to the internet on this one.
Definitely have to give it that. These things sound meaner.
It shrieks.
What was the answer on your DB meter deal?
Well, you know what? Oddly enough, this was the quietest. They were all pretty loud. I mean, the meter goes to 130 and the straight pipe was almost 129.
Okay.
This is 128 and that was 127, basically, if you round off.
I don't know what the scale is on DB, whether that's really audible to you in the car or not, but I'm just gonna go ahead and say that doesn't matter. They're all the same.
Besides volume, sound quality, this was the best. This was probably second best, and it was a little burbly with the separated banks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Agree?
The other thing that I gotta bring up for the audience is I know that When people see the episode, they're gonna look and realize we did all of our testing just with the mufflers open on the end, no tailpipe whatsoever. And you know that there's gonna be people who are going, your test is invalid because you have to have a tailpipe on there for the wavelength of the...
Ooh, good imitation of the internet.
Did I sound like a keyboard commando?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I know. It might have been a little over the
good.
top. But regardless, I mean, a lot of people believe you gotta have an extension behind the muffler. And so we were like, you know what, we better check it out. And off camera, Brule found an 18-inch length of pipe and we put them on the ends of the mufflers and we ran our whole test regimen again, same way as we did with the crossover pipes. And the answer is...
Zero.
Nada. At least in this particular application, the tailpipe behind the muffler did zilch. And I don't think that result would be any different if we were running it, you know, with straight pipes or with or without a crossover. It just didn't matter. And we were only dealing with like 2 to 5 pound-feet rather in this episode. I hope next time we can get back to more violence and horsepower, because that's what we're all about on Engine Masters, which is presented by AMSOIL and supported by Mr. Gasket, Senor Gasket,
Senor.
and Earl's Vapor Guard hose.
Hello! Wow. I never want to see that again. What?